All right, welcome in Fourth String Podcast. Gonna do some review of just some of the different games that went on today. We'll talk about Liberty here as well as they just crushed BYU. It is a little bit late. I am without Ben tonight. Ben is traveling. He's at some emo concert, as he put it. So it is just me hanging out tonight. And really just kind of a wild day in college football. But let's start off with Liberty. So hopefully, Liberty fans, if you guys are watching on Twitter or YouTube here, I want to talk about a little bit. So last week, Liberty played Gardner Webb. It felt like they played a really, really bad game. And so anyways, I just put out some things on Twitter. I said, look, guys, this team is playing with no heart. The quarterback position is awful. And quite frankly, last week, I didn't think they looked well coached. And so then today, they come out and just trounce BYU 41-14. I think it was honestly one of the best Liberty games I've literally ever been to. Like, I don't recall a Liberty game being that good. And so, anyways, I'm sitting there and somebody who had saw the tweet last week, who was like, do you think you should take any of that back? And I said, no, absolutely not. In fact, today was confirmation of exactly what I saw last week. I said last week this team wasn't well coached and they didn't play with heart because I didn't think they were well coached. And I didn't think they played with heart. The fact that they can come up today in a game against BYU and it's just this massive, the home, like the crowd complete sellout. It's this massive home game and Liberty comes out and plays like that, and it's so different. Well, that's confirmation that last week, if they're capable of doing this, then they should be better than beating Gardner Webb by 1 point. And so, anyways, I thought it was confirmation of everything that I had concerns of last week. Now, what I will say is this: Jonathan Bennett, the quarterback, absolutely deserves some recognition. He had one horrendous pass today. It was an overthrown ball, it was an interception. But the one thing I'll say about it is it wasn't a bad decision. It wasn't a bad read. He made the right read. The ball just sailed on him. Outside of that pass, though, he was absolutely phenomenal the whole game. He made the right reads. He knew when to run. He was patient, but also quick and decisive. That's exactly what you need from him. If he's going to play like that, Liberty maybe doesn't lose a game the rest of the year. That's just, and that was the Jonathan Bennett that I think we all hoped we were going to get. You saw the experience today. We haven't seen him play with that level of experience or that veteranness that we really thought we were going to get from him. He's really, for the most part, and I tweeted this earlier today, like from what he was week one up to today, I had seen zero improvement. He was still making the same mistake over and over and over and over again. And so today, really, I felt like, aside from that interception, like after that interception, and even on the first drive of the game, Bennett looked incredible. The other thing that I would note too, just being at that game, is, I've always had this theory in college football that when you have a 12-game season, you're going to have 2 games where the ball is going to bounce your way and you're going to get more calls than the other team does. And you're going to have 2 games where the ball absolutely doesn't bounce your way and the other team's going to get calls better than you will. And so I thought today there were a lot of things like the fumble that BYU recovered, the pass that Liberty should have intercepted but didn't intercept. There were a lot of things where the ball didn't bounce their way. And then the way the game was officiated, there were some horrendous calls in that game. There were 2 potential targeting penalties I thought should have been there, neither of which were called. There was a pass interference against Liberty that was just, it wasn't pass interference at all. It was like literally perfect defense. You couldn't write an instruction manual better on how to play defense than what the defender did. And so for him to get called for that pass interference, just absolutely insane to me. And then you had just a couple of other plays there too. Several plays with illegal man downfield, just some different, just kind of weird things that went against Liberty. And so when you look at, okay, you're going to get 2 games where the calls are favorable, ball bounces your way. 2 games where the calls aren't favorable, ball doesn't bounce your way. This was definitely the latter, and Liberty still came out on top and did so in a big way. That, I think, speaks volumes to what this team is. The other takeaway, because everybody today is talking about the difference in Jonathan Bennett today and Jonathan Bennett the past several weeks, and they absolutely should. The guy was incredible. But the thing I just don't think we talk enough about is how good this Liberty defense is. And my thought going into this game is, we've seen Liberty against UAB, we've seen them against Akron, we've seen them against Old Dominion, and yeah, I mean even Wake Forest, great in that game, but the Wake Forest quarterback, and man, his name is escaping me at the moment, but in that game he was fresh off of an injury, so he was like, I mean, who knows if he was playing at 100%. And so, anyways, Sam Hartman, that's his name, and so I was really interested today to see, could the Liberty defense, could they hold their own against a BYU offense that even moved the ball against Arkansas last week? I mean, BYU, it's not been a perfect season for sure, but the one thing they've had all year is offense. And again, aside from the first quarter, the Liberty defense was absolutely insane the entire game. I mean, getting after the quarterback, the secondary was there. There really weren't a lot of missed tackles. I mean, again, the first quarter, you had a drive where, they converted on a 3rd and long, big play, lots of missed tackles. That was sloppy. That wasn't great. And then the other touchdown was off of the Jonathan Bennett interception where they had great field position to start off with. But aside from that, Liberty's defense completely shut down BYU all game long. And that's just a huge testament to how good that defense is. I think after watching that game today, you could make the argument Liberty's not just got a good defense for a group of 5 program. They've got a good defense for anybody in the country. That to me feels like literally a top 15 defense in the nation, just what we saw. And so that's extremely encouraging. And, real quick, we'll move on to some other college football here in a minute. But Liberty's got a BYU, or he has a bye week going into next week, and then they're going to go out Arkansas. That bye week could not be any better timed to try and figure out, what do you have in Jonathan Bennett? What are we going to get in Charlie Brewer? Who's going to be that starting quarterback? Let some of these other starters kind of get, rested up and healed up and everything. That's massive. And then you're going to go to Arkansas, and Liberty's game with Arkansas is kind of sandwiched in Arkansas' schedule. I don't think this is a game Arkansas wants to have. And so if Liberty gets through Arkansas, I mean, you look at the rest of it, it's UConn, it's Virginia Tech at home, it's New Mexico State at home. I mean, there is a good chance right now Liberty is staring at a 10-11 win season. And I just don't think that was on anybody's radar at the start of the year. So great job by Hugh Freeze, as always. Today, listen, last week they were deserving of not just my criticism, but there were other people criticizing them. Today, they are worthy of everybody's praise. They've been phenomenal today. Great game for Liberty. Let's talk about a couple other things. So UCLA went into Oregon. They were absolutely trounced earlier today, and I've got another screen, so I'm pulling up stuff over here as well. But they were absolutely trounced by Oregon today, 45-30. And I think, and again, we're going to do our top 10 later in the week. I'm probably going to have to move UCLA down. I don't know that I will move them out. And here's why. I just think with Oregon, we never pay enough attention. We never give enough credit to how good their home field advantage is. I mean, I would argue that Oregon has the best home field advantage in all of college football. For one, it doesn't matter who Oregon seems to play. I've never seen an empty seat in that stadium. I never have. It's always incredibly loud. The weather is always bizarre. It's one of these places. It's a weird, funky place to play. And so, most places in college football, most home fields, like the average is a 3-point swing on just kind of an average home field. Now, there's some places like Miami, the Hurricanes, they really don't have any home field advantage. So it's kind of almost like playing on a neutral field in terms of how Vegas looks at it. But then I'm thinking like Oregon, what is their home field advantage? And I'd make the argument it's around 8 to 9 points. I mean, it's literally just such a big advantage with how loud that stadium is, how weird the climate is there. And, the only thing I can really compare it to is in the NFL, Denver has been notorious as one of the best home records in like September and October. And then after October, they're not as good at home. And so it's always been real interesting. It's always been a discussion point among people who bet the NFL is if you're going to bet Denver, regardless of the team, they actually have way more value in September and October than they do later in the year. And what it really boils down to is the altitude in Denver. And I mean, I went to Denver literally a couple months ago, and I'll tell you, I got altitude sickness. It completely wiped me out. And I know it's at a point where other teams go in, and when they go into Denver, like literally, if a player has altitude sickness, they won't play. And so the Broncos have always had this just weird home field advantage. And so I look at Oregon and it feels very much the same. You watch that Oregon team today, you can't tell me that's the same Oregon team that got crushed by Georgia earlier in the year. And yes, I think they've developed and they're a better team and all of that. But I also think for Oregon going to Atlanta, Georgia to play a game versus playing in Austin is just a massive, massive swing. And so I look at the game against UCLA. I don't think anything less of UCLA. I feel just more confirmed that Oregon's home field is just an insane, insane place to play, and it gives them a lot of wins. Today, I think was their 25th straight home win at Autzen Stadium. It's insane how good they are there. It's going to a couple of other games today too. So Ole Miss loses today to LSU, and I mean, I said this when we did our top 10 that I liked Ole Miss. I did not feel like this was a playoff team. I felt like they were very limited in what they're able to do. Jackson Dart, he is a good quarterback. He's a good game manager. He does not feel like he has the legs or the arm to play at an elite level today in this game. But I was watching this while we were in the cabana at the Liberty game, and the second half, LSU just completely controlled it. And that is a huge testament to Brian Kelly. The fact that he's come in and we're a little bit over the halfway point in the season, and LSU looks like this. And I said in the offseason, like when we were prepping and everything, I said LSU in week 1 is not going to be a great watch. But you watch this, and by the time we get to week 9, week 10, LSU is going to be a completely different team. And sure enough, here we are. LSU looks like a legitimate player right now in the SEC. And Brian Kelly hasn't even brought in any of his players yet, any of his recruits. No, don't forget. Back in the summer, Brian Kelly said, look, Jaden Daniels wouldn't normally be my guy, but we've got to have somebody at quarterback. That's how he feels about this guy. And they put up 45 points with him. If you look at what Brian Kelly did at Notre Dame, and you understand that Notre Dame, you can't bring in top 5, top 10 players in the country. But at LSU, you can. He's going to turn LSU into a winner at some point, and of course, it won't be this year because they've already have 2 losses. But at some point, Brian Kelly is going to win a national championship. He's just too good of a coach not to. And I've never understood the criticism that he gets. And I know he does the cringy videos and all of that. But if you watch this LSU team today and you watch them against a well-coached Ole Miss team, I mean, this was a good Ole Miss team that went in there today. LSU in the second half, their adjustments completely shut down Ole Miss's offense. And that says something. This Ole Miss team has been good all year long. And so I was just thoroughly impressed with LSU. Now, another game that's happening right now is Texas A&M is losing to South Carolina 24-21. The game actually, like literally 5 minutes into the game, South Carolina was up 17-0. And I think we've got to at some point have a conversation about Jimbo Fisher. Like The guy can recruit. There's no doubt. But there is a difference between being able to bring in top talent and being able to build a roster with top talent that is cohesive, that you can game plan around, and that you can go and win with. And the one thing about the SEC is you have got some great coaches. Shane Beamer is a phenomenal coach at South Carolina. Mike Leach at Mississippi State is a great coach. Nick Saban obviously is the GOAT. Lane Kiffin is amazing. I think you look at Tennessee and Josh Heupel as coach. Kirby Smart has figured things out at Georgia. He's a great coach. And so when you start looking at these SEC teams and you start ranking coaches, where does Jimbo Fisher fall? Because honestly, and I know the guy can recruit, but honestly, I look at him and I think he's about ninth or 10th best in the conference. And so A&M has these, and they always have, they've always had these championship aspirations. Like A&M fans look at their program as nothing different than Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, USC. That's how their fans look at it, right? But yet, if you look at Jimbo Fisher and where he ranks in this conference, if he's the 10th best conference, realistically, can you finish better than 10-2 in a given year? I don't think you can. And I just think at some point they've got to look at this and go, okay, we're bringing in all these top recruits, but the main reason you're doing it is because you're paying a ton of money on the NIL. I mean, what Nick Saban said in the offseason about this team, it really was, it was rough, it was brutal, but good God, it was the brutal truth. He was absolutely right. They're bringing in players because of the money that they're putting out. And the players they're bringing in, I don't know that they're a good fit for what Jimbo Fisher is wanting to do. And the fact that they are at South Carolina, a rebuilding team that doesn't have the capacity to recruit 4 and 5 star athletes on a consistent basis, unless Steve Spurrier magically came back to be their coach. The fact that Texas A&M was struggling with this one again, I mean, you got to shake your head and wonder at what point does A&M go, enough is enough? If you're going to be a big program, you got to admit, starting off the year 3-4, not making a bowl with those type of recruiting classes, big problem. So I think A&M's got a big problem. Alabama, by the way, just polished off Mississippi State 30-6. It's incredible. Alabama's defense completely shut down Mississippi State up until the fourth quarter. This is a Mississippi State that is high flying. They pass the ball a lot. They score a lot. They get into the end zone a lot. And Alabama just completely shut them out. And this has been my one thing about Alabama. I think they have the best defense in the country. But here's the thing about having the best defense in the country. You can see the way they played today. But what happens when they go up against a team like Tennessee? It becomes an offensive game. We saw this with them against LSU a few years ago. Alabama had a great defense. But when you are up against an offense that is that potent, that has that much talent, it doesn't matter how good your defense is. You cannot stop an offense that is that good. And so I love what Alabama did today. They shut down Mississippi State, but they've got to figure out an offensive, not a defensive answer if they end up matching up with Tennessee in the SEC championship. Now, I think Alabama and Georgia in the SEC championship would greatly favor Alabama because I just don't think Georgia's offense is as good. But if it's Alabama and Tennessee again, what you saw last week from Tennessee is not just Tennessee pulling off a win. Tennessee is legit a mismatch for Alabama. And so you watch this defense and what they're able to do today, they got to do that on a more consistent basis. By the way, South Carolina just scored on A&M, so they are now up 30-21, 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. 3 minutes to go. So they're up 9 points. I mean, and it's about ready to be 10, by the way. I mean, to me, that game's over. It's a 2-possession game, 3 minutes to go. That game's over. So A&M's likely about to fall to 3-4, 1-3 in the SEC. South Carolina's going to go to 5-2 and 2-2 in the SEC. Let's look at A&M's schedule because I think their chances of getting to a ball right now are very slim. Thank you to our sponsor, not sponsor, Falcon Smash. All right, so let's see. A&M next week. Now they're going to get Ole Miss next week. It will be at home. Ole Miss is going to be coming off of the loss to LSU. Now, I like good, talented teams that are coming off blowout losses. That actually feels like it should be a great place to take Ole Miss in that game. But we'll see. Then they're going to get Florida at home. They're going to play at Auburn, and then they're going to get UMass. Okay, they'll win that, and then they'll get LSU. So they've got at least one win on there with UMass, presumably. I mean, they did lose to App State earlier in the year. But Florida at Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss. I mean, okay, so they're going to be 3-4. So they would have to win 3 games. So we'll give them UMass. So now they got to win 2 games between Ole Miss, Florida, Auburn, LSU. Now, granted, 3 of those 4 are going to be at home. So that's a big advantage. But I don't know that they can do it. And so I think A&M legitimately is staring a 4-8 year down the face. Like that's what I think A&M is going to be, is about 4-8, maybe 5-7. And again, how long do you keep Jimbo Fisher? At what point are you tired of coming into the year with all these expectations and it just doesn't work out? Speaking of teams that come into the year with crazy expectations and it never works out, Miami. Guys, it boggles my mind that at the start of the year, every pundit had Miami winning the ACC Coastal. I'm going to pull it up right now. Let's see, ACC Coastal predictions. Pull it up. All right, ACC preview. This is from Yahoo. Let's see who they had winning the ACC Coastal. All right, let's go down here. Okay, so they had Clemson as the best odds, minus 145. Second best odds, Miami at plus 600. I mean, it's just insane to me that anybody thought this team would do it. All right, let's see. We're going to find another one because, I mean, legit, everybody had Miami winning it. All right, let's go Bleacher. Oh, no, wait. Okay, so let's check Bleacher Report. All right. So Bleacher Report had Miami. Yes, their opening line is Miami for real. And talking about star quarterback Tyler Van Dyke. That's interesting. Power rankings for 2022 college football season. This is from Sports Illustrated. They, by the way, had Duke down at 14. Duke obviously is not at 14. Duke's probably going to be somewhere around 5 or 6. They had Miami at number 3 behind NC State and Clemson. So they also had Miami winning the ACC Coastal. And yet, guys, Miami is now 3-4. They lost to Duke today, 45-21. Miami turned it over 8. Yes, the number's right. 8 times in that game. 6, by the way, were fumbles. And Miami now has lost 4 of their last 5. Their lone win was a 20-14 win at Virginia Tech, who is a complete and total mess. The fact that Miami only won that game by 6 points says everything. And then you look at Miami's schedule coming up. So they've got at UVA next week. Now that's a winnable game, even as bad as Miami's been. They're going to get Florida State at home. I don't know. Florida State's been kind of on and off all year long. At Georgia Tech, at Clemson, home against Pitt. So they're 3-4. So they got to win 3 games out of that stretch to get to a bowl. I don't know that Miami can do it. And so I think we could very legitimately get to bowl season, and Miami's not being represented, and Texas A&M's not being represented. But the biggest thing that I see right now with Miami is they hired Josh Gaddis out of Michigan. He was Michigan's offensive coordinator last year. He goes into Miami. And this is probably one of the biggest whiffs I've ever had. I said at the start of the year, Josh Gaddis is going to be a home run for Miami, and it is going to be a big, big loss for Michigan. Well, look, Michigan hasn't missed a beat. And doesn't that say everything? That he can leave Michigan? Michigan can bring in a new quarterback. From, by the way, having a great quarterback, they can bring in a new one, and the offense looks tremendously better. And the offense doesn't look one-dimensional. Like, they can do tons and tons of things. In Miami, meanwhile, he goes down there, and the offense is just pathetic. But this is the thing that I've been saying about Mario Cristobal. He underperforms everywhere he goes. Look at Oregon the past few years. He had Justin Herbert there as his quarterback. Justin Herbert should have been a number one overall pick, hands down. Like, the kid is so good. Mario Cristobal couldn't get him there. Last year, they came in with all these high expectations. They had one of the best defenses in the country. They were trounced twice by the same team in the same fashion. That should tell you everything. Look, Mario Cristobal can recruit, and that's fine. But as far as building a game plan, he's awful. And this should be what Miami fans become accustomed to with him as their head coach. I think they whiffed on this hire. I know it's 7 games into the year, but it's funny to me because back in July, all the Miami fans, all the media pundits were talking about, hey, Miami's back. Cristobal's the guy. And they were just trashing Florida. And I look at Florida, and it feels like what the Gators have is much more substantial and much more sustainable. And what Miami has is a potential train wreck waiting to happen. So they get crushed. I mean, they didn't just lose a close game to Duke. They got absolutely destroyed. Duke outscored them 21-0 in the fourth quarter. The fourth quarter. That is not how Miami should play. And by the way, nobody, I'm going to see if I can pull up the actual attendance in this game. Nobody was at this game. Like, nobody showed up to cheer on Miami. And that I also think, too, nobody will talk about this, but that is evidence of a bad coach. If the coach can't get the team, or can't get the fans hyped up for this, that's on him. Let's see. Does ESPN show the attendance? I could be looking wrong here. Attendance 57,421. You look at this picture. There's just nobody there. And I mean, I think that stadium seats. Okay, let's see. Hard Rock Stadium. Let's see. Capacity. Seats about 70,000. They had 55,000 there. So I mean, literally, the stadium 3/4 full. It's a big ACC game. In this picture, I don't even see how it's 3/4 full. The entire upper deck, there's nobody there. Big problems in Miami. So Clemson survives against Syracuse. They benched DJ Ugungale, brought in the backup Klubenek, and Ugungale threw 2 picks, 13 of 21, 138 yards. Will Shipley was really the story here. Ran for 172 yards and 2 touchdowns. Maffa ran for 94 yards and 1 touchdown. So Clemson ran the ball really well. This is what we said was going to be Clemson's demise at the start of the year, is what kind of play were we going to get from DJ Uiagalelei? And it started to look better, but guys, I said last week, I said, I'm not sold on this yet. I want to see more. And today, against what I think is not a great, it's been a good, but not a great Syracuse defense, he completely fell apart. This was a big game for Clemson. It is a home game for Clemson. He should have looked phenomenal today, and instead they were in a back and forth. Syracuse had the ball, by the way, had the ball on the last drive of the game, down 6. They were moving. They had a chance to win it. And Syracuse shouldn't have even scored 21 points, but part of the reason they did was because of 2 interceptions thrown by Uiagalelei. And I just think Dabo's got to make this move at some point. The rest of the team is good enough. Will Shipley's good enough. The defense is good enough. You've got good enough receivers. The one thing missing from Clemson, the one thing that I think separates them from being a ACC champion, playing in a BCS game or New Year's Eve game, can't believe I just called it a BCS game, playing in a New Year's game and playing in the playoff and being competitive in the playoff, is going to be competent quarterback play. And Uiagalelei he is not it. And okay, great. He can look great against, Georgia Tech or whatever. But you put him in a game like this against Syracuse where you need him to come through, and he's playing like that. That just, to me, you wouldn't get that even from Georgia. You wouldn't have that. Michigan definitely doesn't have that. Ohio State definitely doesn't have that. And so if you look at what's the difference between Clemson and that upper echelon of schools, that's it. The quarterback play is completely different. So I think, they've got some things to be worried about as well. Penn State, by the way, absolutely rolling Minnesota 45-17. What a disappointment Minnesota's been the past few weeks. In Penn State, back to looking like a top 10 team today. So big win for them. Wisconsin gets the win over Purdue 35-24. Graham Mertz finally looked like a decent quarterback today, threw for 2 touchdowns, so that was good. So Wisconsin looks like they're going to save face and get back to a bowl game. Ohio State got off to a rough start against Iowa and just absolutely dominated them really from the second quarter on. This was Ohio State's game. The fact that they won this game 54-10 is just crazy to me. But this is what Ohio State is, and I'm going to be interested to see what happens when they play Michigan. Ohio State is like they can punch you in the mouth. They've got a great knockout punch, and the thing is they can hit you with it at any point in the game. They don't have to get off to a crazy first quarter start. They don't have to crush you in the middle of the game. They don't have to win with an incredibly great fourth quarter, but they can win with any and all of those. And so at any point, Ohio State is capable of just going off. And CJ Stroud is just an absolute wizard. And you're watching this game against Iowa, and I mean, I swear it feels like Ohio State has 20 receivers on the field because they've got guys open everywhere. And I've never quite seen an offense look like that and be that good. Now, the one thing that we're starting to see from Ohio State, it's maybe a little bit concerning, is not much in the way of a run game. Henderson, past couple of games, so only 38 yards today. Now, he was good past 2 games, but only 19 yards against Toledo and only 87 yards against Arkansas State. You need him to be a little bit more consistent, but with what CJ Stroud's doing with this team, and I mean, the receivers on this team, which I can't pronounce the names of half of them, but they're great. I mean, the Ohio State is just great. Their offensive line might be the best offensive line in the country. They at this point have to be in that championship conversation. Let's see. So let's check in on the TCU game. So TCU, they were down, by the way, to Kansas State 28-17 at the half. They now lead Kansas State 38-28. And guys, we're going to have a discussion about TCU if this keeps up. They are doing things, and I know it feels weird talking about TCU in this light, but they are doing things that only national championship teams are capable of doing. And this today, again, against a really, really good Kansas State team, to make the right second half adjustments and be this good in the second half. I mean, that's what championship teams do. And Sonny Dykes has just absolutely got TCU rolling in the right direction right now. And it looks like Kansas State's about to punt and they're down 10 points. It looks like TCU is going to squeak out a win here against Kansas State as well, up 38-28. It's just incredible the turnaround that we have seen from a TCU team that I thought was probably going to be near the bottom of the Big 12 at the start of the year. And here they are, really with a legitimate chance, I think, to sneak into the playoff. You look at the rest of their schedule, by the way. At West Virginia next week, that should be a win. Texas Tech at home. Then they're going to go at Texas, at Baylor. So they got some tough away games. And they're going to end with Iowa State at home. Keep your eye on the game at Texas on November 12th. Because if they survive that, I mean, why can't TCU go undefeated? Like, why can't they do it? It's just a great team. It's an explosive offense. And you start talking about wins over Oklahoma State, wins over Kansas State. And I know Oklahoma's kind of falling apart, but beat Oklahoma. They beat Kansas at Kansas. And if we get to the end of the year, they have a win at Texas. I mean, TCU's got to be in that conversation. They've just been too good. Oklahoma State, by the way, beats Texas 41-34. Quinn Ewers, really just kind of a weird game for him. He was 19 for 49 and threw 3 picks. Coming into the year, there was a lot of concern that he would be more of a boom or bust type quarterback, that, you could have games like you had against Oklahoma, but then you could kind of have games like you had today against Oklahoma State. He hasn't had the crap game today, but it is interesting to me that even with him playing as bad as he did, Texas was still able to rattle off 34 points. But again, look at the second half with all of these games and look at the adjustments. Texas had 31 points in the first half. In the second half, they had 3. Like, that's just such a stark contrast from one half to the next. And Quinn Ewers couldn't complete a pass in the second half. I mean, he was awful in the second half of that game. So yeah, I mean, I've been knocking on Oklahoma State all year long, but I think it's finally time to admit, you beat Texas like that, you have a second half like that. Like that is real. Kansas drops their 3rd straight game. They lose to Baylor 35-23. That is not great. West Virginia gets crushed by Texas Tech 48-10. So not a great day there for the Mountaineers getting crushed. Let's see. Let's go over to Pac-12. Who's playing right now? Oregon State's up on Colorado 35-9. So Oregon State's going to be bowl eligible. Washington up on Cal. They just scored. So that's going to be 6-0. They just hit a second field goal there. Stanford knocked off Arizona State 15-14. A little bit frustrating. I had Stanford -2. So they win by 1. So a little bit of a bad beat in that game for me. Let's see. JMU lost to Marshall 26-12. All of JMU's points came in the first quarter. So it looks like the media must have ranked the wrong team a couple of weeks ago. That's what that sounds like. Notre Dame got a win 44-21 over UNLV. Let's see. Let's keep going on the scoreboard here. I mean, that's really about it from today. Louisville up on Pitt. They were in the fourth quarter, 14-10. Louisville driving. That's an impressive win for Louisville. They are 3-3 and 1-3 right now in ACC play. Not only is it an impressive win, it's a much-needed win. If Louisville had lost that and fell to 3-4, they've got Wake Forest, JMU, who obviously is not going to be easy at this point, at Clemson, NC State, in Kentucky. So you look at the remaining schedule, 4 of those teams are ranked. JMU, the only one that's not, and JMU was ranked at one point in the year. So Louisville, I mean, they are going to be in a battle the end of this year to try and get into a bowl game. I mean, it's going to be a battle. So if they are able to hang on and beat Pitt, that will do a huge favor for them playing into it. So looks like Louisville just hit a field goal. They are now up 17-10 over Pitt. So 7-point game. Pitt's going to get the ball back, see if maybe they can score and get back in that. Wake Forest crushed Boston College 43-15. Wake Forest is now 6-1 on the year. Their only loss, by the way, a 6-point loss to Clemson. That's it. They're going to play Louisville, NC State, UNC, Syracuse, and Duke. 3 of those 5 teams, by the way, are ranked. So if Wake Forest, who's ranked 13th right now, what happens if they finish out and they go 11-1? Where would they rank? They're obviously not a playoff team, but are they good enough to be a New Year's Bowl team? And I think 11-1 with 4 ranked wins as they beat Florida State. The only loss being a 6-point loss to Clemson, who might be in the playoff. They've got to be in that discussion. All right, guys. We will be back with Ben at some point this week, hopefully. Regardless, I'm going to put my top 10 out there tomorrow. I want to wait for some of these games to finish, especially that TCU game. I got to make sure they hang on. You guys have a wonderful week. Go Flames. Big win over BYU today. What a fun game that was to be at. Y'all have a good night.